He killed 40 million people. He destroyed entire civilizations. He erased cities so completely that grass still does not grow there today. But here is what nobody tells you. The world you live in right now, the roads you travel, the trade that feeds nations, the laws that protect you, some of it exists because of him. This is not just history. This is the most terrifying and fascinating story the human race has ever lived through.
Before the empire, before the conquest, before the legend, there was just a boy. Born in 1162 in the freezing wilderness of Mongolia. No palace, no army, no future. His mother gave birth holding nothing but hope. His father named him Temujin, meaning iron. Nobody knew yet just how accurate that name would be. He was 9 years old when his entire world collapsed. His father poisoned by rival tribesmen at a feast he thought was friendly. And what happened next was even more brutal. His own tribe, the people his father had led, looked at this widow and her children and rode away. No food, no protection, no mercy. Just a mother, 5 children, and a Mongolian winter that had no interest in their survival. What those years did to Temujin cannot be fully described in words. He hunted rats to survive. He watched his siblings go hungry. He learned that in this world, nobody was coming to save him. And then came the moment that changed everything. A fight with his half-brother over food. A moment of rage. A decision that could never be undone. Temujin killed him. He was still a child, but childhood was already over. The years that followed were a masterclass in suffering. He was captured by enemies and forced to wear a wooden slave collar. He escaped alone, in the dark, across terrain that killed grown men. He was betrayed by allies, abandoned by friends, hunted across the steppe. But every time the world tried to break him, it only made him harder to break. Here is where Temujin began to think differently from every leader who came before him. The Mongolian tribes had always operated the same way, loyalty based on blood, on family, on clan. Temujin rejected this entirely. He promoted men based on ability, not birth. He shared wealth with his soldiers, not just his family. He protected the families of fallen warriors as if they were his own. In a world built on betrayal, he was offering something no one had felt before. Real loyalty, real protection, real belonging. And men followed him for it, in the thousands. But power attracts enemies, even from the people closest to you. Jamuka had been his best friend, his blood brother, the man he had sworn oaths with under open sky. But as Temujin's following grew, Jamuka watched, and what he saw made him afraid. 2 visions of leadership, 2 ideas of what Mongolia should become, and only 1 step large enough for one of them. The friendship ended. The war began. And in the first great battle between them, Temujin lost. Not just lost, was destroyed. Jamuka captured Temujin's commanders and executed them in the most terrifying way possible, boiling them alive in cauldrons as a message to anyone who followed Temujin. Most men would have broken. Most men would have surrendered or disappeared. Temujin did neither. He retreated, he rebuilt, he waited, and he studied what had gone wrong with the cold, precise focus of a man who had decided he would never lose again. What followed over the next decade was one of the greatest military transformations in history. Temujin reorganized his army into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, a structure that allowed him to command with a speed and precision no enemy had encountered before. He built intelligence networks that gave him information about enemies before they even knew war was coming. He used psychological warfare, spreading fear so effectively that some cities surrendered before a single arrow was fired. And he made one rule absolute. Those who submitted peacefully were protected. Those who resisted were erased. The final battle with Jamuka came on a night when the steppe itself seemed to hold its breath. Temujin's commanders lit fires across miles of terrain, 5 fires per soldier, creating the illusion of an army 10 times larger than what actually stood there. Jamuka's scouts reported back. The numbers were impossible. The fear spread through the camp like fever. By morning, Jamuka's coalition was already fracturing. Commanders were switching sides before the first charge. and when the battle finally came, it was over fast. When Jamuka was brought before him, Temujin offered something unexpected: reunion, forgiveness, brotherhood restored. But Jamuka refused. He said, "Two suns cannot shine in one sky," and he asked only for one thing: to die without bloodshed, as befitting a noble warrior. Temujin honored that request. It was perhaps the most human moment of everything that followed, a glimpse of the man inside the conqueror. In 1206, the Great Kurultai was called, a gathering of every Mongolian tribe. And before all of them, Temujin was raised on a white felt carpet and given a new name: Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. Mongolia unified for the first time in its history under one man, one law, one purpose. But ruling Mongolia was never the goal. It was only the beginning. What came next stunned the world. His armies moved at speeds that seemed impossible for the era, covering ground that other armies could not match in months. They used feigned retreats to lure enemies out of position. Siege engineers from conquered civilizations were absorbed and turned against the next target. The Jin dynasty of China? Gone. The Khwarezmian Empire, one of the most powerful in the world? Gone. The Islamic Golden Age centers of Baghdad and Samarkand? Devastated beyond recovery. In 25 years, the Mongol Empire became the largest contiguous land empire in the history of the world. But here is the part of the story that most people never hear. After the destruction, something remarkable happened. For the first time in history, a single legal and political system covered the distance from China to Eastern Europe. Merchants could travel the Silk Road without being robbed or taxed into poverty at every border crossing. Ideas moved, technology transferred, cultures collided and combined. Some historians call this the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace. The man who destroyed more than any conqueror in history also created the conditions for one of the greatest periods of global exchange humanity had ever seen. In his final years, Genghis Khan faced the one enemy he could not defeat: time. In 1227, during a campaign against the Tangut people, he died. The exact cause remains disputed. The exact location of his grave remains one of history's greatest mysteries. By his own command, the burial party killed everyone they encountered on the route to his grave. The soldiers who attended the burial were killed. The location was trampled by 1,000 horses to erase every mark. He had built an empire visible from space, and chose to disappear from the earth completely. After his death, the empire was divided among his sons and grandsons, and without his singular genius holding it together, the fractures began. The Ilkhanate in Persia, the Golden Horde in Russia, the Yuan dynasty in China, each powerful in its own right, but none of them what their grandfather had been. Because Genghis Khan was not simply a system, he was a force of nature, and forces of nature do not have successors. So what do we do with this man? He killed 40 million people, roughly 10% of the entire world population at the time. He destroyed centers of learning that took centuries to rebuild. He erased civilizations that might have changed the course of human history. And yet, the world he left behind was more connected than the one he found. The question is not whether Genghis Khan was good or evil. History rarely works in those simple categories. The question is, what does it mean that one man, born with nothing, abandoned at 9 years old, enslaved, hunted, and broken, rebuilt himself into something the entire world could not stop? Power without wisdom destroys everything it touches. That is the lesson of Genghis Khan. Not that conquest is impossible, but that conquest without purpose leaves nothing behind worth keeping. The steppe is still there. The grass grows where his armies once thundered. And somewhere beneath that earth, the universal ruler rests in a grave nobody can find. Perhaps that is exactly how he wanted it. Genghis Khan, born with nothing, died ruling everything, and still, after 800 years, the most studied, most debated, most feared conqueror in human history. If this video made you think differently, share it with someone who needs to see the bigger picture. Subscribe for stories that go deeper than the surface. Until next time.